I want to welcome our viewers back to another coronavirus conversation. Our special guest this week is Cherrie MacInnes, who is a school teacher here in Maine who has several connections to Margaret Chase Smith over the course of her career. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
And since you have the most unique setting so far, can you let people know where you are and what that lovely background is?
Yes, we're spending the week at the Yukon Cottages on Lake Cobbossee-County in Winthrop, Maine. It's a very peaceful place to quarantine.
And you've had a beautiful week pretty much so far.
It has, and we've enjoyed listening to the loons and listening to the sounds of the waves.
So why don't you give us a little background about yourself?
Well, sure. I'm an educator in the state of Maine, and I just finished my 30th year of teaching. I'm currently teaching 4th grade at Greeley Middle School in Cumberland, Maine. I live in Scarborough now. At the time, some of the time that we're going to talk about, I was living in Bangor. But I have 2 grandchildren, and they're the reason that we moved to southern Maine, and we just love being near them. So my life is wonderful.
Very nice. So we'll start with your very first connection to Margaret Chase, or what I know is your first connection. It may actually be earlier, and that was when you were in school, you came for a visit.
I did.
Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. My family moved to Maine, and I was in 6th grade at Smithfield Elementary School, and my teacher was Mr. Osgood, who was also the principal of the school at that time. It was just a 4-room, 4-grade schoolhouse. And so he announced one day, and he was so excited that we were going to take a field trip to Skowhegan to meet Senator Margaret Chase Smith. And I really didn't know anything about her. So the kids around me were excited about it, but being new, I really didn't know much about Margaret Chase Smith. I was excited for a field trip and to, be out of the classroom. And I ended up having a day that is just frozen in my memory, which tells me what a special woman she was. Mm-hmm. And so we took a bus to Skowhegan, and she opened the door and let us into her home. She gave us a tour of her home. We saw her bedroom, and she just welcomed us into a personal part of her life. And then we sat in, I don't know if it was the living room or a study. I just remember her sitting at a chair, and we all sat on the rug in front of her at her feet, and she had cookies and lemonade for us. And she just talked to us and answered our questions. And she was so kind, and she had such a gentle voice. And I just remember her smile and her laugh, and I really enjoyed that day. And I just can see myself still sitting there in her room.
It's a wonderful memory.
It is.
And we hear so often, she didn't have any children of her own, but she seemed to have a very good rapport with young people. And
we were in 6th grade. And she was good with us. That's a hard grade.
And a genuine affection for young people as well, and an interest in them. Do you remember anything she said to you?
I was thinking about that, and I really don't. I mean, I can remember being in the moment and being in awe of her and feeling her warmth and her kindness, but I don't remember, the specifics of her talk.
It's hard to beat a memory of cookies and lemonade.
Yeah.
And so you had pointed out when we were emailing back and forth with our librarian, Angie Stockwell, that this is around 1973, 72 or 73?
Yeah, it was the 72-73 school year.
Okay.
I'm old.
We won't do the math.
Okay.
So the one thing that we right away realized is this is before the museum and library here. So you're literally coming to her house and coming right into her house. There's no museum and library.
Yeah, and it looked a little different. The house looked a little different on the outside as far as the siding and the color and stuff than what it is right now.
But the other thing that just dawned on me this morning is it was a very interesting time period in her life in that she had just lost her only election.
Yeah.
And this is a time when she's a little bit wounded, having been, in her mind, somewhat rebuked by the people of Maine. She even lost her hometown of Skowhegan.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
And so it was a time when she was having to figure out what she was going to do with the rest of her life, which is still going to go on for almost another quarter of a century. And what she eventually decides is she's going to have the museum and library, in part because she likes this idea of school kids coming to visit. So
Yeah.
you may have, you may not realize this, but in a way you may have contributed to the idea that she was going to have a museum and library, and not at some college or university, right at her home, so that she could meet with young people.
Yeah, she was a dedicated and giving person throughout her entire life to the community and the state and the country, for sure.
So now we are going to fast forward, and you become, you move on from Smithfield Elementary School, and you become a school teacher, and you're teaching in Brewer. And I'm trying to remember, I think it was, well, there was the tsunami in the Indian Ocean, and I have 2005 written down. I don't remember if the tsunami was like at the end of 2004 and you came in 2005.
That must have been it.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
So can you tell what your recollections were about that visit? And again, I think it was in 2005 that you actually.
Yes. So it was my first year teaching third grade and my first year being in the Brewer School District, and the tsunami hit, and it was really powerful, and our children wanted to do something about it. I think children across the country hadn't seen anything like that, and they wanted to help, which is, you know, what's wonderful about their kind hearts. And so they came up with the idea to sell popcorn. So we turned our classroom into a popcorn factory. We had microwaves and popcorn poppers and baggers and labelers and sorters, and we sold popcorn. And I can't remember how much money we raised, but somehow, I don't know how you found out. I never found that out. You ended up contacting me and saying that if our students came to the Margaret Chase Smith Library and did a presentation on our project, that the library would match the funds they had raised. And so we were so excited about that. So the kids came up with what we wanted to share with you, and they created posters, and we took the bus ride from Brewer to Skowhegan. And I remember you giving us a tour of the library and museum, and it was the first time as an adult that I really knew about her involvement with NASA. And I still have in my mind you showing us the picture of her in the orange jumpsuit with the high heel shoes, and then explaining to us the involvement that she had, which was so impressive, and helping to make sure that a man landed on the moon. And we did our presentation. It was a big room where we ate our lunch and we did our presentation to you. And I think you gave the kids some feedback, and they got to ask some more questions, and then we headed home, and it was just a wonderful day.
So I'll give you a little background on how it came to be. I actually was hired in 1996 to help promote education programs, and that was the year after Margaret Chase Smith passed away. She died on Memorial Day, May 29th, 1995. And so long as she was alive, as in your day, she was an attraction. People from all over the state would want to bring their school kids here. Even from as far away as Aroostook County, school groups would come. But after she passed away, the attendance plummeted because people had this idea, well, she's not here anymore. There's no reason to come. And so what we decided in 1997 was, well, if school groups aren't coming to us, then we're going to invite them to come. And we came up with this idea of promoting community service. So what we started doing is just looking for stories in newspapers and on television about groups of young people that were getting involved in their communities, and sometimes the community writ large, like your community was the world. People in Asia who were impacted by the tsunami. And so anytime we saw groups like that, we would invite them. And we got a pretty high response rate when we sent out these invitations. And we always tried to provide some money to either pay for the transportation and help out with the projects that young people had been working on. And we usually were able to do about 50 of those a year. And so we've done it for over 20 years, and we've given out tens of thousands of dollars to these groups. And it was always very impressive, the commitment that the young people had to projects that literally were all over the world. I know that year we had a lot of groups coming to talk about projects they had done to
It
help.
really let my students know that what they were doing was important and respected and worthwhile. So,
Well, that was one of the things that we realized right away is, in some respects to us, it seemed like a minor thing. We were only offering a couple $100, but it was particularly, especially for the teachers, it felt like it was one of the few times the work that they were doing was getting recognized in any way. Yeah. So even though it was a modest amount of money, they were so pleased for someone to have noticed beyond the school.
Definitely.
So it's been a wonderful project that we've been able to do. Unfortunately, it ended very abruptly in March of this year, and it looks like we won't be able to invite school groups here this year as well. Maybe we'll talk more about that in a moment. But before we leave 2005, I'm going to try sharing the screen and showing one of the photographs we took that day. And you had mentioned in the posters, I think that will be one of the things that people will see in the photograph is the kids are holding up the posters. So if you want to provide any commentary once I get that up.
Sure.
So here's the group. You remember about maybe 20 students or so?
You know what? I think I had 16 students that year.
Okay. And did you say
well, how many are there? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Oh yeah, there are more. Well, I think when I started the year, I think I had 16 because it was a small group and then we grew.
And did you say they were third graders?
They're third graders, and so they tried to put in the message that we wanted for why we were doing what we were doing and what had happened. It looks like there's a poster showing where the tsunami took place.
Yeah.
And
then in terms of, I see one sign that says caring, respect, trust, family, responsibility.
That's the community of caring philosophy that the Brewer school system uses. Okay. And our project certainly tied right in with that philosophy. And then it looks like there are photos of our popcorn factory as well.
I see that. I see one that says labeling bags, and it looks like there's a table that's set up maybe for the processing. Yeah.
It's one of those things I wish there had been a video camera in the classroom so they could have seen the whole picture of our classroom and how we were working together like a well-oiled machine. Mm-hmm. And the kids were so involved and so focused on what they were doing. I mean, there were no behavior issues during that project, that's for sure.
I'm seeing this is back in the old days when we were still printing out paper photographs, or I think in 2007 we went all digital. And so down the bottom, it's timestamp, March 31st, 2005.
Wow. Yeah, so when did that happen? Was it like in November or December of 2004, the tsunami?
Yeah, I think it was towards the end of 2004. And just to remind people, it was very devastating. I think it was over 300,000 people died. An earthquake that triggered a tsunami that I think mostly affected Indonesia, but the tsunami went in other directions as well. I think people in Thailand and India as well were affected.
Yes, and the students really didn't know what a tsunami was, so because it wasn't something we heard about very often. And so we had to do a lot of research to learn about what it was and what caused it.
Mm-hmm. And we were just doing the math this morning, and these are about 8 or 9-year-olds in this picture, but that would put them 23, 24 now. And you said you still have some contact with some of them?
Yes, there are a couple of them right there that I still hear from. So it's pretty neat.
Very good. All right, I'm going to stop the share and come back to the two of us. So your third connection, and this is one we just stumbled on. We closed here to the public and were sent home in, I think, the second week in March. And what we're finding is, as we were reconfiguring how we work, there are some things that fell through the cracks that we only discovered much later. I did know that with schools pretty much being closed and instruction having to go online, I did know that Maine Public Television created a series of educational programs But what I didn't know is that one of the people who was invited to create one was you. And what I furthermore didn't know was the topic that you had decided to talk about was Margaret Chase Smith. So I guess I'll go back to the share screen and just show what that looks like.
Okay.
And can you talk about how this came to be?
Sure. So the Department of Education, MPBN, and Educate Maine and other sponsors wanted to provide some lessons for students that didn't have internet access that we could bring right into their home through the television. And so they contacted members of the Maine State Teacher of the Year Association, which I belong to. And I can't remember how many people said they would be willing to do the lessons. It was a lot. More than what they thought, because we are in the middle of this pandemic trying to figure out how to teach from our homes.
Mm-hmm.
And then this opportunity came along, and many of us just knew that we would be able to help more children with their learning doing this. So teachers signed up for different topics to teach, and a lot of people were doing reading, writing, and math, and I just love social studies, so I wanted to do some lessons on social studies in relation to Maine. And I knew I wanted to do something about Margaret Chase Smith. I've had the connection with her. I teach about her every year to my students because I think she's someone that they need to know about and remember. She was a trailblazer and an amazing representative of our state of Maine. So I offered to do a lesson on her, and they agreed. And my husband was so kind to help me. We drove to Skowhegan so that we could have the film be on, on location, and people could see exactly where she lived and where her school was, and some of those things that would bring the lesson to life. I also have the Margaret Chase Smith book by Lynn Plord in my classroom that I use every year, but it was quarantined in the classroom, so I didn't have it to be able to read.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just gambled and contacted Lynn Plord to see if she'd be willing to read her book for my lesson, and
Mm-hmm.
she said yes. And the day she said yes, she had fallen and broken her wrist or her elbow, and she said, I don't know if I have to have surgery, but we'll make sure this happens. So you'll notice that when she's reading, she's in a sling. But so I was just, and then I ended up getting an autographed copy of the book from her, which was
Mm-hmm.
really sweet. But yeah, it was a great experience.
Mm-hmm. You came up to Skowhegan. Again, certain things fell through the cracks when we were home. Do you remember when you did that? What month it was? Was it early on?
It was
later?
It was, I would say the end of April.
Okay. And you just
I would guess.
just came up.
Yeah. We just hopped in the car. And of course, the material, the equipment we were using was just my phone. And I just edited it on my computer and then sent it to them, and they tried to make it a little bit better. So what we were using as teachers to create our lessons were, it was not very high tech. But.
In my recollection, it turned out well.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank goodness for the iPhones.
I don't remember any glitches in it. In fact, we were all trying to rack our brains. We couldn't remember if we keep records on previous researchers, and we couldn't remember if you had been here earlier and recorded things. And we're trying to think, could she have done it when she was here with the kids in 2005? And think,
no.
You're very resourceful.
Well, it was nice to get out of the house too. It was our first long drive to do that, and it was great to get out, and a great trip down memory lane for me to go and stand on that ground again.
Very nice. Well, thank you for doing that. Thank you for selecting Margaret. We were very honored.
I will continue to teach about her as long as I'm educating children.
Excellent.
So.
Well, the other thing that threw me is I think somewhere I saw an announcement. They were trying to, I think, with the new school year approaching, someone put out word, it was probably this Maine Department of Education, about how there was this package. I think it was about 20 to 24 lesson plans along the lines of what you did. And they were promoting those. And they mentioned, they made mention of Lynn Plord, and they mentioned Margaret Chase Smith, and I thought that would be the connection, that someone had taken Lynn's book and done something with it. But actually, there's two of these lesson plans that feature Lynn. One is more about the writing process.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one I found first. And I said, oh, okay, so she's going to talk about the writing process. She's going to use her book about Margaret Chase Smith. And I watched it, and she never mentioned Margaret Chase Smith at all. So I'm scratching my head and said, well, where's Margaret Chase Smith? So I had to look more deeply through the list, and then I found yours and found you're the one who did Margaret Chase Smith, and you threw in Lynn Ford that way.
Yeah, and I think I don't think she had done that lesson, because I had explained to her what MPBN was doing and all of that. So I think that came afterwards.
Oh, so you inspired Lynn as well.
Or somebody connected her with her. I don't know, but she, she does a lot for the state of Maine and the children of Maine. So
very good.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we will be doing as the school year approaches is we'll try to be highlighting this material as well, and people can go and view the lesson plan that you did. But can you just highlight what lessons you were trying to teach, and just even in general in your classroom, what lessons about Margaret Chase Smith do you try to teach to students?
Well, I like to bring the past and the present into my classroom, and really focus, a lot of the times I try to focus on women in politics, women as inventors, women as historians, as trailblazers, just so that the children see that there are women out here that have done incredible things, just like there are male scientists that have done incredible things. Because I want my students to know it doesn't matter what your gender, you can be whatever you want to be, and if you work hard, you can make a difference in this world. And Margaret Chase Smith doing what she did at a time when women didn't have prominent roles in politics was pretty incredible. She was a trailblazer. And there have been a lot of trailblazers from the state of Maine, and I don't think anybody should forget about them.
Very good. So to let people know further, Maine Public calls this the learning space. So if you Google the learning space Maine Public, you'd probably find it. We'll be, over the course of the fall, putting out the link often to try to drive people to take a look at your lesson plan. So we have a little time left. I'd like to talk about teaching during a pandemic. So first of all, can you take us back to March and what the last part of last school year turned out being like for you?
Sure, because it was unprecedented, and that was a word we heard a lot then, and it just happened to be a vocabulary, just a week or so, vocabulary word, a week or so that I'd used in my classroom, and then it was everywhere. But I think every district was different, and what was available to students across the state and across the country at any time was different. But our school, I teach at Greeley Middle School, we hit the ground running. School was canceled that weekend. On Monday, the teachers were there with the principal and the superintendent planning, and we set up for the students to come and get materials on Wednesday, and we started teaching on Thursday. So it was very harried in the beginning, because we had lots of technology glitches, parents and kids not knowing how to use Google Classroom or some of the other programs that we were using. So it was really nonstop, morning, noon, and evening, connecting with students and parents, trying to get everything in place and helping them to understand the routine. And we started out just learning materials, reviewing materials that had already been covered. So it was something that was familiar as they figured out the technology. And then when we realized this was going to go on for a longer period of time, we started doing learning new concepts. So what I found was most important through this whole experience is to make connections with my students. They needed to know that I was there for them, that they were not alone. A lot of times they just wanted to sit and have a face-to-face conversation with me because they were lonely and they were scared, and they didn't know how to process all that was happening either. So we just tried to do the best we could together.
So were you able to have your students together all collectively, or did it become essentially one-on-one instruction?
I did a little of everything. So we had class meeting. I tried to do our morning meeting like we normally would. I had office hours. We had lessons that were videotaped, but we also had lessons that were live. I did small group work and individual work depending on the student and their needs.
Mhm.
So, and it was emergency learning. We were just trying to figure things out and we were constantly making adjustments as we were going along. So I think should we go to remote again this school year, we're going to be better prepared. We'll know what worked well, what we want to change. And I know that we'll start the year making sure the students really know how to use, for us, it's Google Classroom, how to work through and find where they need to be and how to hand in assignments and access their calendar and use Google Meet and all of those kinds of things so that they will be more independent should we go back to remote.
With the remote learning, did you find that the parents were more involved since the kids are right there at home?
It was a range. It was a range. There were some that, we saw their pets, but the parents were working, and so we didn't see them very much. There were some that we didn't see at all, and there were some that were right there sitting next to their kids during the lessons. So, like if I had a student trying to figure out a word, I would give them the time to try to figure out and not tell them, but I could hear a parent say, interrupt or whatever, and give them the word. So yes, it was a wide range.
All right. So that was all sort of having to learn this all on the fly.
Oh boy, yes.
Beginning in March. So a new school year is approaching, and what is your district and school's approach going to be?
So my school is doing a hybrid model. So I'll have half my kids on Mondays and Tuesdays. Wednesdays are for teachers to plan and have meetings and things like that from home so they can deep clean the school. So we're not allowed in the school on Wednesdays. And then we'll have the second half of the group on Thursdays and Fridays. And then at the end of each of those 2 days, we will give the students both work that they can do away from the computer and work that they will need to do using their technology, and they will do remote learning on the other days.
So September 2019 compared to September 2020, have you had to completely do your curriculum, or are you trying to stick to the same curriculum and just present it in a different way?
It's so funny. This is the start of my 31st year, and I am as nervous as I was probably my first year of school because there's so many unknowns about how long will we be in this position and how will it go and how will the kids do it keeping their masks on, especially on a hot day. There are just so many unknowns, and I think that teachers are just going to go in there, do the best they can, stay positive, let the kids know that we're there for them, and we're going to have to be very brave because I know a lot of us are scared.
It's more adapting on the fly again for the fall too.
Definitely. Although we've definitely had more time to think about it. And I know that districts have worked really hard to get our schools prepared. Our schools have been deep cleaned. We have sanitation stations in every classroom and in the hallways. And, there are a lot of things they've done to get the school ready for us to give in class a try.
Will you be instructing with a mask on?
Yes.
Have you tried that?
No, well, I just am finding that it's hard to hear when you have masks on. So I feel like I'm going to be saying to my students a lot, excuse me, can you repeat that? And they'll probably do the same for me. I think some school districts are getting microphones that they can use. Those that are doing live stream will have them. I don't think for the elementary right now that that's something we're going to have. And again, we don't know how long we're going to be in this position, but yeah, it's going to be different. And my principal was so kind. She took a picture of each of our classrooms because we hadn't been able to be in yet, and she sent it to us so we could see what it looked like. And it kind of reminded me of going back in time because the desks are kind of spaced out, all facing the same direction, and kind of a little more old school looking than I've ever taught. So yeah. Exactly.
No more circles and squares.
Yeah. And figuring out how we're going to help them without being able to get closer than 6 feet or, tie shoes, zip jackets, hug someone if they're upset and crying. I mean, there are so many things that are going to be so unnatural that we're going to have to deal with in a way that we never had before.
How many students will you have?
So I have 22 total. So I'll have half at a time. So
Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. That helps out. Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Very
Definitely.
good. Well, I hope it goes well for you. Are you getting any guidance on how long they think this will be, or is it just sort of week to week?
I think every district, it's different. My district will reevaluate in 6 weeks, every 6 weeks, what we're doing. But we also have the guidelines that will come out from the state every 2 weeks. So today, guidelines come out again. We'll find out if we're still green.
Okay.
And, that will dictate what we do as well.
Mhm.
And as long as kids stay healthy,
Sure.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, I hope it goes well.
Me too. Me too. We're going to do our best.
Very good. I thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. I don't want to take too much of your time because you have a gorgeous setting to enjoy as your vacation wraps up before you head off to this grand experiment this fall of bringing kids back to school.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure for me, and I've loved that we've reconnected after all these years and that you enjoyed the lesson that I did on Margaret Chase Smith.
Well, hopefully we can remain connected and maybe help you out during the upcoming school year. Thank you
You
very
know,
much.
I'll take you up on that.
Well, I'm going to be emailing you. We will definitely talk about that some more. Thank you
Thank you. I
very
would
much.
love that.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.